Hello, and welcome to Improbable Things. I'm J. Grace Pennington, and this is my podcast where I share 6 improbable thoughts before breakfast, which for this podcast consists of 6 thoughts about reading, writing, or storytelling in general. So after a couple of weeks off, I am glad to be back and ready to share my 6 improbable things with you this morning. So as I mentioned, I was a couple weeks off. Honestly, I don't even remember what happened that first week. And then last week, my alarm went off to share. But a little over a week ago, there were storms in our area. And thankfully, we were fine. The house was fine. But the storm did knock out our power for a few days. And we were so well cared for and very grateful that we have power restored and we had so many people helping us out. But one thing that people did to help us was lend us a generator and some big fans to help keep us cool without air conditioning. And that was so nice, but it was also so loud. So there was no way I was going to be able to record in that situation. But all that to say, we have power back. And I really wanted to meet with y'all this morning and share some things because it's been a while. So I'm going to just get started on number 1. I have been working on rewriting my current work in progress, Firmament Progenitor, book 10 in the Firmament series. But of course it's going slow, as always seems to be the case. I was hoping to finish it up last month, and then I really wasn't able to work on it during the power outage. And of course it's just, things always go slower than I'm hoping, but it is going. It's going, again, slowly but surely. I'm about halfway done with it, and there's really not a lot of big changes that need to be made, so it's going very smoothly, and I'm hoping it'll be like, I don't know, another week or 2, so we'll see how it goes. I'll keep you all updated. So number 2, I've also been working on the audiobook, or the second edition audiobook for Radialloy, the first book in the series, because the audiobook that's up currently, not only is it from the earlier edition of the book, so there's just a few things here and there that have been changed, but also I've just gotten better at audiobook recording since then. I have better equipment. I know how to do a better job, and so I just wanted to get something better up there. And I'm enjoying it. I'm enjoying revisiting the story. I'm really excited about how it's turning out. Excited to share it. But I am so frustrated by all the typos that somehow, I mean, I shouldn't say all, there's not a ton, but there are typos that still slipped through after going through that book so many times. I mean, there was all the editing I did, paying an editor, going through it again myself, and then for the 3rd edition going through it all again, and still there's a few things. Like I was just reading or recording a couple nights ago, and Andy said something about putting her arms by her side instead of sides, and it was just frustrating to see. Thankfully that's the kind of thing I can easily fix for the audiobook. And I might have to do another typo run at some point to just try to keep improving, but it's just crazy how that happens. It has happened with every book I've published, and I go through every book, 4 or 5 times myself before I send it to my editor. My editor goes through it and is very good at catching many things that I somehow missed after all those passes, and then I'll go through it at least one more time after he gets it back to me, if not more. And yet still, typos. It's so frustrating. But thankfully, like I said, there don't seem to be too many, but I would rather there be none. So number 3, I was looking over the other day over a few new reviews of a few of the earlier books in the series, which was great. Although I'm really hoping to get some reviews on the later books because most of them have like 1 or 2, or I think some even none. So really hoping to eventually build up some reviews on those, but I was grateful to get some really positive, encouraging reviews for some of the earlier books from new readers. Plus, it's always just great to know that there are new readers out there enjoying the work, especially when these have been around for quite a while. So that's great. No complaints there, but one slightly frustrating thing. So you may recall, if you've listened to this podcast for a while, that one thing I did when I went through and updated new editions for all the books is that I changed Andy's age, because originally she was 21 years old in the first book, and many people were complaining that she felt way too young, like that felt too old, that she should be like 17, 18, something along those lines. So I decided to go ahead and receive that feedback, and also I knew that, I had just become a little more familiar with genre conventions and knew that it was easier to call the books young adult if the protagonist was a teenager. So I reworked the timeline, went through all the books, changed all references to her age, and now she's 18. And then on some of my new reviews, I had someone saying that she acts, and they weren't really complaining, they were very nice about it, but they were just saying that in their opinion she acts more like 14 or 15. And I was just like, what in the world? How I can't win. And I personally, it's just weird. I've had this complaint with other protagonists in my other stories as well, that they act too young. And I'm always a little perplexed by that, because I'm just like, well, I've been these ages and it seems realistic to me. So maybe I was just super immature when I was that age. But I don't know. I'm like, I also know other people these ages and it feels realistic enough to me, but apparently it doesn't to other people. So I'll admit that I'm slightly frustrated by that, but ultimately it doesn't really matter. Of course, you can't please everyone in writing, and whatever, it doesn't matter as long as people can still enjoy her stories, even if they feel like her age is maybe off. It's just strange to me, because again, it feels fine to me, but that's life. Like, no book is going to please everyone, and so it's fine. I'm not upset about it. I just think it's just kind of funny. So number 4, one thing my girls have been working on in their school, and before we even started school for a long time, is there's a little app called New City Catechism, and it's just like it sounds, a catechism app, and it has some a version for adults, but also has a version for kids where the answers are just a little simpler, and there are little songs to go along with it to help you memorize them. So I've been working on those with the girls for a long time, and then once we started doing school, we got more consistent about it. And so we started nearing the end of the first section. There are sort of 3 sections, 3 categories of questions. And we got to, I think there was 20 questions in the first one, and they'd been working so hard on them, doing so good for a long time. And so I told them, once we were just 2 or 3 questions from the end of that part, that when they finished all the questions in that section, we would have an ice cream party to celebrate, and they could recite all their catechism answers for their dad and pick out whatever kind of ice cream they wanted, and we would just have a little celebration because they worked so hard on it. So they got excited and of course extra motivated, and so we finished that up, and they learned all these 20 basic sort of theology questions and answers, and they've done so great on it. And one thing that's been super interesting to me is just to see, it's just one example of this, but just the differences in giftings and learning styles between my older 2. Now my 2-year-old, she did memorize several of them, but I wasn't really asking her to, so it was a little bit of a different process with her. She just learned whichever ones she picked up just by hanging out with us and with the other girls. But it's just very interesting because my 2 older girls have such different personalities, and one thing I've learned pretty recently, really, or I've noticed a lot more recently, is that my second, who's 4, has a really good memorization skills. Like, she catches on very fast, and she's very driven to memorize things. Like, they're supposed to be memorizing Isaiah 53 in their Sunday school, and she's just picked up on it so quickly, loves to recite her verses, and it's just been, and my oldest is also good at memorization. Like, she's very good at it, and you know, catches on also quickly, but it's just there's this extra added layer of just quickness with with my second. And so it just was a really special thing to be able to do. And now we've already started in on the second section, so however long that takes, like, we're not in a rush. We just go over a few questions and work on our new one at the very beginning of school each morning. And so, maybe in a few years we'll be having another ice cream party, who knows. But it was just, I figured I could include that as I'm like, well, it's word related, so hopefully it can be allowed for one of my thoughts for this morning. So number 5, I am currently reading The Lincoln Highway by Immortals. I hope I'm saying his name right. And this is for book club. And we read his 2 other books in our book club a while back, which were A Gentleman in Moscow, which I absolutely loved and everyone else loved. And then I think the other one was called The Age of Civility, which I had mixed feelings about. Didn't love it overall, but still liked it, and it still has kind of stuck with me. But I think that other people in book club liked it less than I did. So it'll be interesting, to read and discuss this one. I actually have no idea really what percentage I'm at, or sort of how far I am, because I'm actually listening to this one on audiobook, which I'll talk a little bit more about in a minute. But I'm a few chapters in, and I am liking it so far, and I am very interested. And as with his other stories, I'm finding it very hard to predict where the story is going, which is kind of nice for me, because I tend to figure things out a lot in stories, just I think because I've read and watched so many of them. But I'm just enjoying the ride on this one, liking the characters, liking the author's writing style for the most part. Again, I'll explain more in a minute, but I'll be interested to see again where the story goes, and then also how it fares at book club after the mixed reaction we've had to the author's works in the past. And I'm also paying attention for references to food as I read, because I'm supposed to be the food co-host, and normally, if we can, we often do try to theme the food to the books, and there's already been some really good references to food, so I'm excited about that also. So number 6, I have something else to say about Lincoln Highway and why I'm listening to it instead of reading it. Now, I used to do a whole lot of audiobooks, but the past maybe couple years, I have kind of gotten away from it. And there's not really a hard and fast reason for that. I still do like audiobooks. I listen to Agatha Christie on audiobooks, but I do that to fall asleep, so I tend to listen to them in like 5-minute increments, so it takes me a while. And there's a couple other books I have read lately here and there via audio. But I just found, for one thing, I just like holding the book. I like actually reading. I was just finding that, I don't know, that's just the way that I most enjoy ingesting the material. And also, I'm just finding that at this stage of my life, it's actually easier for me to get through a book, faster by reading than by listening, even though in theory, you can listen and do other things, so wouldn't that be faster? But I can only really listen if the girls are, in bed, if they're either at nap time or bedtime, because otherwise they're just constantly needing me. I'm constantly having to take care of things. And so if it's going to be while they're in bed, then it's faster for me to just read than to listen. So all that to say, I did get the hard copy out from the library, and it's a pretty thick book, so I'm sure it's also a long listen, but I didn't pay attention before I started to how many hours. But big book, got it from the library, was finishing up a couple of other reads, and then was excited to get to this one. So a couple days ago, I finished the other book I was reading, pick up The Lincoln Highway, open it up, all excited to get started, and find immediately that it is one of those sort of artsy and modernist books that is too fancy to have normal punctuation and follow the traditional rules because it has no quotation marks. And when people talk, that paragraph is separated by a dash, and then it goes on with no quotation marks. So even if you insert like a he said, or some other kind of dialogue tag or little interjection of another type in the dialogue, that isn't separated by any kind of, by a comma, but nothing else. There's no quotation marks whatsoever. And I just absolutely hated it. And I think I talked a while back when we read The Road in book club. I think it was even worse than that with the lack of proper punctuation. And so I ended up having to listen to that one on audio too because I couldn't stand it. And with this one, because again, I prefer generally to read a hard copy, I was like, well, maybe I can handle this. And so I tried for about a page and a half, and then I knew that I could not handle it. And so I ended up listening to it instead. And you can't even tell, of course, how the punctuation is on the audiobook. So that's working just fine, and I'm very grateful for that. But it has gotten me thinking, and I've thought about this before too, about punctuation and rules, and why grammar and things like that, why the rules matter. And also even when it comes to storytelling rules in general and stuff like that. Now those obviously are a little more flexible and they can be broken in a sense, but it's just an attitude that I've noticed, and it is a modernist sort of attitude that we are too good for the rules of the past, and that there's something inherently good and artistic and just overall positive about breaking with these traditions and doing something different. And obviously, rules of grammar and punctuation are not moral. There's not a right and wrong in that sense to them. But I do think that attitude has a connection to the spirit of the age that is rebellious in ways that do matter. And because the rules, even of grammar and punctuation, while they may not be, like I said, a moral right and wrong, there is a reason for them. No, they didn't just arise out of thin air. Those rules are there to aid the reader in understanding the meaning of the writing more easily and more clearly. And when you are writing something, the goal ought to be to convey meaning to your reader. And so if you're doing something that makes it more difficult for them without a good reason, then to me, again, I'm not presuming the heart of any author. They might have some other reason, or I have no idea why people make these decisions, but I'm just saying the spirit in general of this sort of trend, to me, has always seemed very prideful, because it's you thinking that you know better than these established rules without any real ground or basis for it, other than just wanting to be different and sort of be artsy, which is not the same as being artistic. Because when you are artistic, it is you wanting to express yourself, and you want to express yourself in order to convey something. But if you are making the thing more difficult to be conveyed to another person, then again, what good does that do anyone? Like, it's just this sort of, I don't know, I hesitate to say rebellion, because it's not like that serious ultimately. But I do think it just is sort of part of the same attitude of a culture that does rebel against things that matter a lot more and things that are moral in nature, to just have this vibe of